Hey everyone, welcome to Judging for the Win. I'm Dave, and this is my daily ruling. I got the idea for today's question from a post I saw online, and I thought it was a really interesting discussion. Amy activates the zero ability of Ajani Nacatl Avenger while she controls Divine Visitation. Does Amy get to deal damage equal to the number of creatures she controls? Of course, for the purposes of all the questions today, we'll say Amy does have another red permanent. To answer this question, we'll need this rule here. The reflexive trigger from zero ability will trigger based on whether the trigger event happened during the resolution of the first part of that ability. The relevant trigger event here would be creating a 2/1 cat token, but in the situation described in the original problem statement, that trigger event never happened. It was replaced by creating a 4/4 angel token, which does not match that trigger condition. Accordingly, Amy would not get to deal damage to any target. This works both ways. Let's say that instead of Divine Visitation, Amy controlled a doubling season. That would mean that when the zero ability resolved, she would get 2 cat tokens instead of just 1. Therefore, the reflexive trigger would trigger 2 times. Because the ability is triggering twice, they would both go on the stack independently. Amy could thus choose to deal damage to the same target 2 times, or to 2 different targets. Ready for a challenge question to test your understanding? Let's say Amy plays a Wicked Guardian, and has it deal 2 damage to her grizzly bears. Except Amy also controls Mark of Asylum, so that damage to her grizzly bears will be prevented. Does Amy still draw a card? And hold on, does something seem a little off to anyone? That's right, if you read very carefully, maybe you'll notice a difference between the wording on Wicked Guardian and the Ajani that we were just looking at earlier. Whereas the Ajani makes use of a reflexive triggered ability, the Wicked Guardian says, if you do, rather than when you do. As far as I know, this template doesn't have a fancy rules name, so I'll propose calling it an iflexive clause so that I can refer to both of them. Now, if you've been a fan of the channel for a while, then you know that I'm a bit of a templating nerd, and you've probably even seen some episodes where I talk about various ways interactions involving reflexive triggers and iflexive clauses can change based on which template is used. And all that stems from the fact that although the English text differs by only one word, the rules handle these completely differently. The drawing a card in the iflexive clause does not trigger based on how many times the trigger event of dealing 2 damage to the creature happens, because that isn't a trigger event at all. That's why they're called iflexive clauses rather than iflexive triggers. With these iflexive clauses, the same thing that serves the role as a trigger condition is actually considered to be a cost. And following the philosophy of costs in general, if you choose to pay it and some replacement effect changes what events actually happen, that cost still counts as having been paid. Therefore, the if you do clause in the Wicked Guardian will be satisfied even if all the damage gets prevented, and Amy would still draw a card here, completely the opposite of what you might have expected based on the earlier ruling. And it doesn't stop there. Remember how the reflexive trigger, being a triggered ability, was able to trigger additional times based on how many times the trigger event actually happened. Well, in an iflexive clause, it doesn't work that way. The check to see if an iflexive cost was paid is binary. The player either chose to pay or didn't. And you won't get any additional effects even if something replaces what happens while the cost is being paid. So, for instance, if there was a Furnace of Wrath out instead of that Mark of Asylum, then the grizzly bears would take 4 damage from the Wicked Guardian, but Amy would still only draw 1 card. If you'd like some suggestions for further research, I talked with Gavin Verhey about why reflexive triggers are taking over some of the spots where older cards would have had an iflexive clause. And that video has some more exploration about the difference between them and why one is used over the other. Also, my video on Shakedown Heavy and Narset's interaction has some more examples about the iflexive clause rule works. And that's all I have for you today. How did you do? Join me again next time for another daily ruling. Until then, I hope you have a great day.